All local, all morning. You're watching Fox 61 Morning News.
And just coming up on 9:30, we begin this half hour with COVID statistics. We want to talk about those a little bit because how to interpret them going forward has changed a bit compared to how we used to do it in the past. That's because a lot of our COVID statistics, like hospitalizations and the positivity rate, were especially useful because they were early predictors of how many deaths were coming down the line. All those curves, when you graphed them, they matched up very well. But that's changing now. Now, you see, yesterday, the CDC did release data that imply the vaccines are a little less effective at stopping symptomatic infections from the Delta variant compared to how they did against other strains of the coronavirus. But those data show the vaccines still work well overall, and they are still excellent at stopping deaths in severe cases of COVID, even from the Delta variant. Let's show you some graphs to illustrate that. You can see evidence of this outside of the U.S. I want you to pay attention to this because this is from the United Kingdom, not the U.S. But they've been a great comparison to us over the course of the pandemic because they now have a roughly similar vaccination rate to us and roughly similar qualities of health care. And their wave of the Delta variant started a little earlier than ours, as you can see. This is how many new cases they've gotten over the past year. Like us, they got this big wave over the winter. There's the recent Delta wave over here. Now take a good look at this curve. Remember it, because now I'm going to switch it a bit to look not at cases, but at deaths. There, we just made the switch. The curve from the winter, when there weren't vaccines, that still looks the same. Cases and deaths look a lot similar. Look over here, though. Recently, no big rise in deaths to go along with the big rise in cases. That right there is due to the vaccines. And we're on the same trajectory here in the U.S., just a little behind. The curves over the last year look familiar, except our Delta wave is just going up. And by the way, did you notice how it was starting to go down in the UK? Also, I want you to note this little bump here in cases from April when the vaccination campaign was underway. So far, though, our deaths have not jumped up. This is cases. Let's switch again to show you deaths in the USA. If we have it, there we go. Look, that little bump in cases in April did not lead to any real bump in deaths, maybe a little leveling off. And we're not seeing any proportionate rise in deaths from Delta now. I say proportionate because I just want to be clear here. Going forward, we can expect to see the number of deaths per day go up in some form. It did go up in the UK, and even yesterday's report here in Connecticut had more deaths than we've been used to seeing. But they're not going up by nearly as much as the cases have been. Cases have been shooting up like a mountain peak, but the deaths curve looks a little bit more just like a speed bump. Again, vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. That is obviously the most common way to describe what's going on and the biggest single indicator, although there are other factors. You never want to oversimplify it. But that's a good sign and just something to keep in mind here as we're seeing case numbers rise. It does not necessarily mean that a disaster is on the way for our ICUs, but we'll keep an eye on it.